Well, hey there, everybody. Hope you're doing well. My name is Matt Adair. Looking forward to spending time with you today as we talk about how to develop amazing leaders in 2017. So, if you're coming looking for help on how to bring in new volunteers into your church, if you're trying to figure out how to train existing leaders in your church, we're going to give you just a ton of helpful training today. Looking forward to starting in about 5 minutes. But I just wanted to jump in early and say hello. Hope you're doing well wherever this finds you. Why don't you go ahead and find the chat room and let us know where you're from. One of the things that I love about doing these events is that we're able to gather church leaders from all over the world, from different continents and countries, different parts of the United States, who are able to kind of just come together and to spend time thinking about how we do a great job investing in the leaders that God is giving us. How do we recruit new leaders? How do we train existing leaders? How do we encourage all of the leaders that God has given us in our church? So love seeing just the information coming in from people where you're from around the country. I'm here in Athens, Georgia, about an hour and a half outside of Atlanta. It's a pretty warm day in the 70s, and just sitting here in the office at my house, drinking some coffee. Really been looking forward to spending this time with you. One of the things that I love about the Rocket Company, and before I started working with them, I was actually a customer and a client, is the fact that there's a dedication to providing practical training and just really top-notch resources for leaders like you. And so that's what our plan is today, is to make sure that you know that you're absolutely in the right place, because the entire reason we're doing this is to help you. 2017 is coming along, and it's coming like a Russian bear over the hill, and it's basically a you against them opportunity. It's an opportunity for you to basically walk into a brand new year and maybe continue the momentum that you're on as a church, or maybe to regain momentum that you feel like you lost in 2016. So I know for a lot of church leaders, and we'll get into this when we start the training, I know for a lot of church leaders that what you don't want to have happen is the same thing that seems to happen all the time, that you get good momentum and then you lose momentum, and it's kind of back and forth and up and down. So we want to try to help you take some really good steps forward. So again, find the chat box, get yourself situated, go grab a cup of coffee before we get started, because we're going to get going in about 2 minutes. And when we do, we're going to basically open up full throttle for an hour, and we're going to talk about the details. Practically, what does it take to develop every single leader in your church in 2017? That might be staff, that might be elders. We want to focus on volunteers and talk about them as well, because every church, most of the leaders we have in our church are men and women that don't draw a paycheck. They give us a handful of hours a week, and they're there to basically help us accomplish the mission that God's given us as a church. So one of the reasons I want to make sure that you know where the chat room is because we're going to do a couple of rounds of Q&A. So that's actually my favorite part. In an ideal world, I would basically walk into a room, whether it's real or virtual, and then just start answering questions. It's my favorite thing to do. But you don't know me well enough to do that, and we need to kind of prime the pump a little bit. So I want to make sure that you're asking questions from the training that we're doing, or just anything that's going to come up for you as it pertains to leadership development. I'm committed to that. It's one of the things that I feel like is one of the greatest needs and opportunities in the Church of Jesus Christ around the world today. So I can't wait to get started here in just a minute. So if you're going to take notes, then grab whatever you're going to use to take notes and be ready to go. We're going to get started here in about just a minute. Again, my name is Matt Adair. I am really grateful to just have your attention and to have an opportunity to serve you today. So this is going to be not theory. This is going to be practical, detailed instruction and training in how to add more volunteers into your church, how to train existing leaders in your church, and how to encourage every single leader that you have so they're going to be with you for the long haul, so that you're just not cycling through time and time again. So we're going to get started here in just a few seconds. We're just basically waiting for other people to come into the room. So here's what we're going to do. In just a minute, I'm basically going to take myself off the screen because nobody wants to stare at me for an hour. And I'm going to share a presentation with you, and we're just going to walk through this together. So I am live here in Athens. This is not pre-recorded. I'm here to basically help you get from where you are to where you want to go when it comes to developing leaders. All right. So as people are coming in, again, let us know where you're coming in from. One of the things I love is being on events like this and seeing people that are from the same city. Sometimes you don't even know each other, but you're able to make connections because you're able to see who's in the room together. And we're going to get started here in just a few seconds. All right. So we're going to go for about an hour. We're going to do training. We're going to basically make sure that you have time to get your questions answered about developing leaders and volunteers in your church. So why don't we go ahead and get started? All right, so here's what we got, y'all. We are going to talk about how to develop amazing leaders in 2017. And so again, I'm really looking forward to being with you and spending this time together. And I promise over the next hour to show you how to get more of the right kind of leaders, because it's not enough just to get more leaders and more volunteers. By the way, kind of a side note, if you came here thinking that we're going to talk about volunteers and you see me talking about leaders and you're confused, maybe this will help. If you think about volunteers and you're trying to recruit and add more volunteers to your church, I think of them as leaders. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute, but it's just the same thing. When you think volunteers and I say leaders, we're talking about the same person. I think the volunteers in your church are leaders. That's how I see them. That's how I want to treat them. That's how I want you to treat them. Okay, so we want to make sure that you get more of the right kind of leaders. We don't just want volume. We don't want just quantity. We want quality as well. I also promise to show you how to build a team that frees you up to do work that matters most. So a lot of people who jump into training like this are senior ministers, lead pastors. And so the work that matters most to you might be sermon preparation. So I coach lots of pastors and help them with their sermon planning, preparation, and delivery. And you know as well as I do that all the things going on in your church sometimes press in on your ability to prepare and get ready to preach on the weekends, right? So I want to make sure that you have a team of people around you that can take on some of those other tasks so that you can focus on sermon preparation or to focus on strategy as we get into 2017 and you start thinking about what it is that you and your church need to be doing. Where do we need to be going? What is God calling us to do? What is the particular part of his mission that we are supposed to carry out? You need time to think and pray through that. And so we need to build a team around you to make that happen. Or we need to make sure that you have a team of people around you that can free you up to shepherd the people that God has given you. I know very few people that got into church work because we hate people. We love people. We want to help people. We want to help people follow Jesus. We want to help hurting people. But so often there's a task list that's so long in our church that we can't get to the people that we want to help the most. And so I want to make sure that you have the best opportunity possible to build a team of leaders around you so that you can focus on the work that matters most. Now, if you stay until the end, and we're, again, going to be here till about 3 o'clock, I want to give you something that I love to share with leaders, and that's this. I'm going to give you the easiest way to develop any leader in your church. I don't care if that's elders, deacons, staff people, group leaders, volunteers. This is the easiest way to develop any leader in your church. It's so easy that as soon as we're done, you're going to be able to go put it into motion this afternoon, this evening, wherever it is and whatever time it is that you are jumping in and listening to this. Now, what makes this training different? 2 things that I would say in particular. One is, I'm not here to persuade you that leadership development is a good idea. I'm assuming that you believe that leadership development is a significant aspect of your church. The way I see it is this. Our core mission, our core work as churches is to disciple people, to help create, grow, develop disciples who make disciples. Well, I see leadership development as an aspect of discipleship. So it's critical to the health of our church as an organization, an entity, an organism committed to discipleship to make sure that we're developing more and more leaders. So I'm not here to persuade you. I'm basically here to build on what you're already convinced of. That's the first thing. The second thing that makes this different is something about me, and that's the fact that I am currently a lead pastor. Now, on trainings like this, and you'll see this, and lots of churches are doing this, and groups are doing this, that a lot of the people that are leading the training maybe used to be a lead pastor or they used to be on staff, and that's great. They're taking their experience from the past and bringing it in to help you, but I'm still in the game. I'm still in the trenches. I'm the lead pastor of Christ Community Church here in Athens, Georgia. I've been here since 2004. We replanted this church. When I got here, we had about, 30 men, women, children, cats, dogs, goats. We basically took any living, breathing organism and counted it as a something. And by God's grace, we've grown. I pastor a church of hundreds, not thousands, so I'm not a mega church pastor, but we have a healthy, thriving church. And by God's grace, I've been able to lead it for a good long while, and really grateful that I get to do that. But I think that's also helpful for you because I'm thinking about this right now. We're continuing to have to figure out what it looks like to develop leaders in our church. I also have started a business called Gridiron Solutions, and Gridiron Solutions basically works with church leaders to help you grow your preaching, grow your leadership, grow yourself. But when it comes to leadership development, and this is what's helpful for you, that the way I think and operate is I want to help church leaders build great teams so that together you can build a great church. I have 20 years of experience in churches. For a couple of years, I helped lead a global church planting network called Acts 29. So if you're familiar with leaders like Matt Chandler, Matt and I worked together for a couple of years. Because of that and other opportunities, I've been able to coach more than 100 church leaders in 12 countries, which is just an unbelievable thrill to be able to invest in the work that God's doing around the world through men and women like you. I'm married to Lindsay. You can see her on the screen. I'm dad to Jonathan. He's on the right. He's 11. He's a middle schooler. Pray for us. Will is my sports fanatic. He's over on the left. He's 8 years old. And then Ben, my little guy, is 5. He's actually has strep throat today, so that's never any fun, but he's surviving, and that's good to hear. If you care about such things, and if you want to know a little bit more about me, I am a long time, and I think that's important to point this out, a longtime fan of both the Chicago Cubs and the University of Alabama football team. So this is no Johnny-come-lately thing for me. I have suffered for years. But if you want to come at me and give me a hard time about my teams, I'm just going to show you rings and championships. It's just how it's going to go, okay? So just that's for you to know me a little bit and know where I'm coming from. But here's what I want to do. I want to talk a little bit about you, and I want to focus in on where you are, and I want you to imagine what your life will be like. Maybe in a few months, maybe this time next year. Maybe that's helpful. The end of November 2017, I want you to imagine what your life will be like when you have more of the right kind of leaders, when you have more help with the work of the church. I know because I've been there. I know because I work with a lot of pastors and church leaders how lonely it feels and how frustrated it is that we don't have enough leaders, and sometimes we don't have enough of the right kind of leaders. I want you to imagine a different story, and I want you to imagine a different picture. I want you to imagine what your life will be like when you never have to worry about not having enough time to do the work that matters most, things like sermon preparation and thinking strategically and shepherding your people. I want you to imagine what your life will be like when you never have to worry about having unqualified and untrained leaders, because we're going to help you eliminate that. I want you to imagine what your life will be like when you know how to develop leaders, even if you hate systems and structures. I know some of us, we don't think this way. And so when you think leadership development is difficult for you, sometimes even frustrating for you because you don't think in terms of systems and structures. But what happens if we give you a way to figure this out without having to become an expert and a guru in systems and structures? Most importantly, I think, I want you to imagine what your life will be like when you have more time and a better team. I want you to just think about what's at home, the people that are in your house, spouses, kids. I want you to think about what kind of impact it's going to have on them and your relationship with them. If you're more available, if you're not just giving them the leftovers of your time, but you're able to give them some of the best of your time because you have a better team around you. I just want you to imagine what that's going to be like. That's what we're after here. That's our goal, is to create that kind of life and that kind of story for you and for your church. Now, this year alone, I've been able to personally work with more than 70 churches, and this is from church plants to mega churches. Our largest client has more than 5,000 people showing up on a weekend. We work with people who are trying to figure out from before their church even exists at all. It's just in their head right now. So from church plants to mega churches, we've helped them design a simple and sustainable leadership development system called a leadership pipeline. A leadership pipeline, and you're going to hear this word, so if you're taking notes, write this down. And again, we're going to do Q&A later, so you can ask more about this if you need to. A leadership pipeline is a simple and sustainable leadership development system that allows you to recruit, train, and evaluate every leader at every level of your church, okay? Simple and sustainable leadership development system to allow you to recruit, train, and evaluate every leader at every level of your church, okay? So this is what we've done. But here's what's very, very important to me is that what we've done is we've helped churches design that system, design a leadership pipeline that fits the needs and culture of their church. So I'm not basically trying to take what happened in our church and just see that replicated exactly the same way at every church that we're able to work with. No, we try to make sure and have worked hard to make sure that what we're designing looks like, sounds like, feels like your church. That's what we've been able to do. And so why I'm telling you that is because I'm bringing in not just my own experience, but I'm bringing in a lot of data. I'm bringing in a lot of time-tested research and results to help you develop leaders in your church. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, because I think it's important, that the results that I'm going to share with you aren't necessarily typical. So I'm going to walk you through the system that my church used to increase active leadership in our church by 800%. Now, I need to tell you this story. So again, I told you that when I got here in 2004, we had about 30 people in our church. And by God's grace, the church grew. And about 5 years in, we hit one of those pockets of growth where just things took off. And we just all of a sudden had, we were adding gatherings, and we just had people coming in droves. And so we just felt like we were on our way to becoming a mega church. We just thought, this is what happens. This is how it's going to go. And within 1 year of hitting that pocket of growth, we had lost almost all of our momentum. Now, I will tell you this. I did not get worse at preaching. We didn't preach a different message. We had no staff changes as far as we could tell. And we did ask and we prayed. There's no hidden sin. There's nobody hiding gold bars under the tent that we had to go out and stone, if you remember that story from the Old Testament. What we figured out was that we were trying to do way too much work with too few leaders, and things were falling through the cracks. I'll give you an example. I walk into our office one day, and this was I'd say about 6 months into this period of growth. And I look over on the shelf in one of the offices, and I see a stack of these little bitty cards. And I looked at one of the staff guys on our team, and I said, hey, so what are those? And he said, those are, I don't know, what are those? And I picked them up, and they were the Connect cards that we give to our guests and have them fill out when they want more information about our church. And guess who had been following up on those? Nobody. Why? Because we were doing way too much work and things were falling through the cracks. And so when we basically sat back and said, what's going on here? And we were able to see the problem is that we had a bad and deficient leadership development system. Then we were able to basically do a lot of work, do a lot of research, learn a ton, put some things in place that allowed us to, in the span of about 18 months, grow our active leadership by 800%. And so I'm going to walk you through parts of that system and help you see exactly what we did. But I want you to understand that my results aren't typical, because the average person who attends any training like this gets 0 results for a very simple reason. You come in, you take notes, and you don't commit to do anything with it. You think that you now have things in your head, and so you've learned things, but if you don't put that learning into action, then you're not going to get any results. So I'm happy to share with you for absolutely free exactly what's working, not only in my church, but it's working in churches all across the United States and in 6 different countries around the world. But I just need to tell you that this isn't for people who just are showing up to collect ideas. You needed something to do this afternoon. Let's learn about leadership development, but you don't have any predisposition to take action. So I'm telling you that because I want every single person who's on here to commit to taking action and putting this thing in place. Now, I just want to assume that that's what you want to do, and I'm just coming in and reinforcing that desire in your head and heart to take action on things, all right? My results that did, 800% growth in active leadership, I had to learn the hard way, though. What's the hard way? Well, I'll give you some examples from my own story. I may or may not at one time have stood up in front of our church and threatened to cancel a Christmas Eve service. Now, that might sound crazy to some of you, but to others it won't, because you've been there. You're going to have a Christmas Eve service, and you want to have a nursery. And so you ask for volunteers for the Christmas Eve service because you don't want the same handful of people who are always in the nursery to have to be in the nursery. So we did everything that we thought we knew how to do in terms of getting more volunteers. And when not enough people responded and it looked like the same people were going to have to be in the nursery again on Christmas Eve, I just said, well, okay, I'll just take a different motivational strategy. And I'll just say, look, y'all, if you don't respond, we're just going to shut it down because it's not fair to them. That's not necessarily a good way to get the kind of results that you want, right? I'll tell you another way that's the hard way. Assuming that leaders know what to do. One of the things that we found, we went through a season with our group leaders where we had people who wanted to lead groups. They wanted to basically be kind of pastors to the people in our church. But what we noticed is that once we let them loose, you give them 6 months or a year, and all of a sudden you had leaders that were doing not crazy different things, but things that were differently enough to where the experience wasn't common. And so what we had forgotten to do was to make sure that we clarified expectations. And so we were kind of attuned and aligned and going in the same direction. So we kind of screwed that up and had to backtrack on some things. And that wasn't the easiest conversation to have with some of our leaders. Another thing that we really struggled with and was really difficult was trying to do too much to develop leaders. We went through a season where we were trying to figure out leadership development, and we just saw all the resources, all the different ways to develop leaders, and we were just stacking different ways to develop leaders on top of each other. And all of it was good, but it became overwhelming to everybody. And so it felt like it was an impossible task that we were basically going to have people take out part-time jobs just to be part of our leadership development system. And we couldn't keep up with everything because we were just trying to do too much. That's the hard way, okay? Now, I'm here to show you the easy way. I want you to learn from my mistakes. And so I want to walk you through some things that I think are going to be really, really helpful for you. So here's what we're going to cover for our time. I want to share some secrets with you. And these are secrets that are just beneath the surface, okay? These are things that when I bring them up, they're going to sound fairly obvious, okay? Those are the best kind of secrets. You put 2 and 2 together quickly because then you can take action on it. So secret number 1, I want to talk about how to recruit new leaders without resorting to guilt, all right? Secret number 2, I want to talk about how to train existing leaders when no one has time for training events. Maybe you're noticing this, but maybe you've been trying to do training events for a long time and people are becoming less and less responsive, not because they hate your church or don't love Jesus, but because they have all this stuff going on. It feels like nobody has time for training events anymore. So how do you train existing leaders when nobody has the time for those events? And then secret number 3, we're going to talk about how to encourage all of your leaders. And it really does come down to a simple math equation. So look at what we're doing here. We're going to spend some time talking about new leaders, how we add more of them. We're going to spend some time talking about existing leaders, how you train those you already have. And then we're going to talk about how do you encourage all of your leaders. Recruiting, training, and encouraging, those are really the building blocks for a healthy leadership development system, okay? So here's secret number 1. How do you recruit without guilt? This is all about how you add more leaders. And again, I think of volunteers. If you came in wanting to add more volunteers into your church and you hear me say leaders, we're talking about the same thing, because when I think leadership, I think influence. And I think people who take initiative, they volunteer, they raise a hand, sign a card, decide to be a small group leader, serve in the nursery, be on the finance team. That's leadership. So I think you've got leadership happening all over your church. That might encourage you if you walked in thinking that you don't have enough leaders. Anytime I speak on leadership development anywhere, I ask this question: what percentage of people in your church are leaders? And I never, ever have anybody say more than 50%. But I think most people in your church are leaders. If they're volunteering, they're leaders, okay? So this is all about how you add more leaders or volunteers. Now, most churches unintentionally guilt people into leadership. I know very few churches that intentionally guilt people into leadership, but I think most churches unintentionally guilt people into leadership. And the truth is, and we know this, so this is just me again, kind of reinforcing things you already know. Guilt never gives you more than a short-term win. Here's what I mean by that. When I say that we unintentionally guilt people in, and that's not going to be a win. It's not going to give you anything more than a short-term benefit. How do you feel when someone guilts you into doing anything? Some of you around Thanksgiving had mothers-in-law who, out of the kindness of their heart, decided that they wanted to convince you and persuade you to do what they wanted. Call it nagging, call it guilting, call it whatever. But we all know what it feels like when somebody tries to guilt us into doing something that we don't necessarily want. Now, in churches, here's what happens. When you guilt people into serving, into leading, at the first sign of trouble, 2 things happen. One of 2 things happen. One, either the leaders just quit. Your volunteers are like, I didn't sign up for this, I'm out. Or leaders become bitter, and I'm not sure which is worse. The person who doesn't quit but stays on as a group leader but is just slowly becoming more and more and more and more bitter at your church. How's that going to work? when they're talking about the sermon? How's that going to work when you're asking them to basically spearhead different initiatives in your church and have them get behind and rally the cause? Yeah. So if you want more leaders, here's the principle. Ask before you have to ask. If you want more volunteers in your church, here's the principle. You have to ask before you have to ask. Now, let me share a case study with you. This is from one of our clients. This Pastor Jeff. Some of the names have been changed. We want to protect the innocent here. So Pastor Jeff was leading a church of about 500, 600 people. In many ways, it was healthy. But the reason that Jeff and I connected is he heard me on a training like this, and I told my Christmas Eve story, and he found me online, and he said, hey, that's exactly what I did that too. Almost the exact same thing. And so here's a church with a lot of people. But what he said, and this is the phrase that he used, he said, we have too few people serving way too often. And so what we basically tried to figure out was, how do you change that equation? How do you have more people serving so that more people can carry the load and more people have the privilege of being able to serve and volunteer and lead in the church? And so we adopted just one strategy at the very beginning. I think it's important. Don't do too many things, just do one thing. And so the strategy was this. They just basically they went around, had one person go to all the different leadership teams in the church and find out, what needs do you have? What volunteers do you need? Just tell us what roles that you need. And we put all those together. And they basically took 3 weeks and they just said, hey, here are the roles that we need. And would you consider volunteering? And so that one strategy, which they executed well, but just that one strategy doubled the number of volunteers in their church in one single month. So when they finished that campaign, so a total of 7 weeks, a 3-week campaign, a month after that, they turned around and had double the number of volunteers. They didn't guilt people in. What they heard was people going, oh, I didn't even know that we needed that. Oh, I didn't know that we needed help doing that. And so that one strategy of just letting people know a need was a game changer for them. Did they resort to guilt? No, they didn't. They just basically presented a need in a consistent way where they weren't just completely pushing people and motivating people out of fear or guilt. They were just saying, here's an opportunity for you to serve, and here's an opportunity for you to be the best version of yourself, because we believe that you want to serve and help and lead. And that's what happened. So that's you can do this. If you ask before you absolutely feel under a barrel that you have to ask, then I think you've got an opportunity to recruit more volunteers and leaders into your team. Now, let's talk about the second secret for a minute. And again, if you have questions about that, make sure you're getting those in the chat room. Kelly's going to jump on in just a few minutes and ask your questions to me so we can really dial into the details of what you're working through. Here's secret number 2. Do less, not more. This is all about how you train more leaders in your church. How do you train the existing leaders that are in your church, all right? Now, most pastors think that if I'm going to train the leaders that I have, I'm going to have to do more. And the truth is, I'm going to have to do a lot more. And who has time for that, right? Well, actually, I think, and I've experienced this, and I've seen this time and time again, your church wins at developing leaders when you do less, okay? And again, so what do I mean by that? What do I mean when I say, look, you don't have to do more. You're actually going to win and get ahead by doing less. Well, here's what I know. Leaders need consistency from you. What your church organizationally needs from you is consistency. I had to learn this lesson the hard way. I want to be very, very helpful to our people. And so what was happening the first 5 years that I was here is that I would basically look at something we were doing, and at the first sign that it wasn't working, I would change whatever it is that we were doing. Now, we had a handful of people that thought that was fine because they liked change. But I don't know about your church, but my church is filled with a lot of people that don't love change. And so it took me about 5 years before somebody, I guess, had the courage or was frustrated enough to just go, hey, will you please quit jerking us around by changing things all the time? Now, what was I trying to do? I was just trying to be helpful. But what I was being was inconsistent. And so they could never figure out what we were trying to do and why we're trying to do it. So when it comes to developing leaders, what do you think that your church needs you to start building in 2017? They just need you to do something consistently. And if you're going to do something consistently, does it make sense that it's going to be simple so that it could be sustainable? If you will focus on simple and sustainable, then you're going to create something that's consistent. And if you create something consistent, then you're going to be able to get ahead. Let me tell you about another one of our clients. This is Amanda. She's the director of a children's ministry of a large church in the middle of America. All right. And when we started working with Amanda, she said this. She said, look, we have a lot of people, a lot of great volunteers, and they work hard. But what we're noticing is that we're kind of working off of different sheets of music. And what's happening? Well, you've got moms and grandmas and aunties, and they were in a university town. So they had early elementary ed majors. And so they had a lot of people that were committed to kids and committed to families, but they all had their different ideas about what success looked like. So you had a good team that was in very real ways committed to the cause, but what they were doing and how they were doing it, they weren't on the same page. So what we did in terms of training their existing leaders is we basically said, here's a 3-step practice that we want to adopt. And that is, when you give a leader a good first step, you clarify expectations through something like a job description and say, this is what it looks like for you to succeed and win. And when you continue to connect with them, and Amanda and her team began doing a great job of making sure that you had somebody who was leading you, that was connecting with you as a human being, asking questions like, how are you? And then just listening. You were creating a real sense of team. So they were getting all of their volunteers together week in and week out before they served for just a handful of minutes, not only to pray, but they were, eating donuts and coffee and spending time together and just being able to get that sense of camaraderie together. So when you give people a good first step, the same first step with continued connection so that people don't feel like automatons, but they feel like human beings whose work matters, and you add on the job training to that, then good things happen. I want to share a story that Amanda told me. A year before we started working together, they had done training on how to help special needs kids in their church, particularly children on the autism spectrum. Now, that caught my eye because one of my boys is on the autism spectrum. And one of the things Amanda said is we did this training, and we thought it went well. We thought it was really helpful, practical. We felt like we basically filled in the blanks, checked off all the boxes, and that was good. She said, about 4 months after we started working together and we shifted away from training events to this idea of on-the-job training, which is basically saying, based on what you're struggling with right now, how do we help you solve that? She said, here's what happened. One of our volunteers came to me and said, so I just switched classes and I started working with the second graders. And there's a little boy, let's call him Matt. We'll use my name. And there's this little boy named Matt in there. And she says, I love Matt. And as soon as she said his name, Amanda knew who he was talking about because everybody knows Matt. Matt is on the autism spectrum, and Matt loves Star Wars. He's obsessed with Star Wars. The problem with that, if it's a problem, is that when you are trying to do story time and craft time, that Matt has decided that regardless of what's going on, he is going to play out Star Wars. And so that means he was running around the room or talking about Star Wars or doing all that kind of stuff. And so this volunteer who a year ago had been in that training, the event about helping kids with special needs, said, I didn't pay attention because I hadn't had the experience of being in that room with Matt. But as soon as I had that experience with Matt, I wanted to figure out how to help him because, yes, he drove me crazy, but I love that boy, and I want to figure out a way to help him follow Jesus. See the difference? Don't be so concerned if people aren't showing up at your training events because you have an unbelievable tool in your back pocket, and that is if you can find out what people are struggling with on your team, then you can help them at the place of their immediate and deepest pain, frustration, and struggle. And so we do this very simply. When we make connections with people, we say, how are you? And connect with them as a human being. We're also going to ask the question, how can we help you? What are you struggling with? And when you get feedback from people on where they're stuck or where they're frustrated or where they don't know how to solve a problem, that's when you can train them. Why? Because they have their focus and attention right there in that spot. So that's a way that this church was able to do less and not more. They weren't doing a ton more training events. Matter of fact, they scrapped almost all of them. And they found that they got so much better retention and so much better attention from their volunteers because they were paying attention to the things that were coming up as they were doing the work together. Hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, if you're clear, if you want me to fill in some blanks, make sure you get those questions in. I want to get to the questions after we handle secret 3. Give more than you take, okay? This is how you encourage every single leader in your church. This is how you keep leaders for the long haul so that you don't have this constant churn of leaders that are in for a season and then they're out and in and then out. How do you make sure you keep leaders, volunteers with you for the long haul? Here's what I think happens. Now, I'm going to say most because I don't know you and I'm not going to pin this on you. You have to basically listen to the Holy Spirit and see whether this is true for you. I think most pastors take more than they give. And here's why I think that happens. I think because there are so many responsibilities that people look to us to help them in so many different ways. I think it's unintentional, but I think at some point in time, we just so desperately want help that we just begin looking for people who will jump on with us. But in that, we're asking things from them, but we forget that we're also called to do things for them. And so if that hits you between the eyes, or if that sounds familiar or feels like it might be true for you, I'm not here to jam you up as much as I'm saying, look, I get it as a pastor in a church for 12 years that, look, y'all, we have a ton of students from the University of Georgia and a bunch of 20-somethings. We have a turnover rate of around 33% a year. So that's like I get a new church every third year. That's not because people leave angry. It's because they move to cities like Atlanta and Charlotte and Birmingham. Why? Because there are more jobs there. So I know how this feels, but I think this happens to a lot of pastors. And I think the key to long-term leadership is doing just the opposite. And here's what I mean by that. Every single leader wants to be encouraged. Every single volunteer wants to be encouraged. Think about yourself. Have you ever been encouraged too much? Maybe on Pastor Appreciation Day for a day, you feel super encouraged, but does that happen consistently? No, I've never met a pastor or leader who's been encouraged too much. And I think too many churches assume that leaders, like volunteers, know that they matter, that they walk around knowing that you really do value what they're doing. Because I'm going to basically assume that you do. You believe and you're convinced and you really believe that what volunteers do really matters. You really are grateful for that. But if they don't know that? When you make assumptions, I won't, repeat that. My mom used to, scrub my mouth out with soap when I would finish that kind of phrase. But when you make assumptions, good things don't necessarily happen. We actually walked through this with another client of ours. Pastor Kevin was pastor of a historically African-American church and a good-sized church. He'd been there for a while. And he said this. He said, I feel like I've got to change the equation in my church. He said, when people look at my role in the Black church, they look at me as the minister. And he said, I know the score of the game. And in some ways, I really, truly embrace that, but I need help. He said, but what I was beginning to feel is that because there was so much pressure on me as the minister that anybody who basically would volunteer in our church or volunteer as a leader in our church, that I would basically be trying to get them to jump on with me to help me. I was thinking about what they could do for me more than what I could do for them. And so he said this, and I've heard this from a few other friends and mentors. He said, what I learned is that I couldn't look at relationships as 50-50. I had to look at relationships as 51-49, and I wanted to be the 51. I wanted to be giving just a little bit more to that relationship than they were basically giving to me. And so he did this in a couple of ways. I thought it was so super smart. He said, I wanted to basically create a culture where we paid attention to what people are doing. So he said, I can remember one Sunday when one of our young boys walked past some trash in a hall and he picked it up and threw it away. And so I just sent him a note the next day that just said, hey, I saw what you're doing there. Thank you for caring enough about us. And thank you for taking responsibility for that. Instead of just saying, hey, thank you for that sermon, Pastor, or instead of just going, hey, I'm so glad that you're serving, thank you, they began to find particular ways that people were serving. They just paid attention to actual work. And so what he found was that a little goes a long way. He said what surprised him was that 4 or 5 years, this is one of my first clients, so 4 or 5 years in, he said it amazes me how many people keep handwritten notes that I've written them just to say thank you. That what I write and what I say matters. And he said, maybe I just wrote them once in 4 years, but they still hold on to that. And I've heard that story and story after again. If you want to encourage people, just a little goes a long way. But if you will thank them in particular ways for particular things that they're doing, it shows that you notice. And I think it shows and demonstrates that you actually care. All right. So if you want to talk about adding new leaders, training existing leaders, or if you want to talk about what it looks like for you to encourage every leader that you have, new or existing, that's some of the best stuff that we're seeing out there. And I hope that's helpful for you. Now, I want to make sure that we take time to just get your questions. And we've got some more stuff on the back end of this But if you have questions, I want to pull Kelly in and see what you do have, and we'll just take a few minutes to kind of dive into the details of what you're wrestling with right now in your church. And so I'm going to try to get about 3 levels down and get as practical as I can to be helpful for you. So Kelly, why don't you jump on and let's see what we've got.
Hey, Matt, we have some really great questions from the chat room. How do you vision cast in a way that makes volunteers excited about serving?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it really has to come back to the big why in your church. Like, why does your church exist anyway? And so if you're basically committed, if you really clarified the reason your church exists, because in most cities that we're in, there are a lot of churches. So what makes your church unique? What exactly are you trying to accomplish? So for us, when we talk about, we want to make Jesus, the real Jesus, impossible to ignore in our city and beyond. And we take that big why and help people see how that plays out on the finance team, or how that plays out in the nursery, or how that plays out in a small group, then I think that's helpful. So one, I think you have to have a consistent why for the entire church, and then you just basically feed off of that. And what you're going to find is that people aren't going to stay deeply connected and loyal to the mission of the church if you just talk about what's in house. But if you can clarify the why for them, this is why we're here, y'all, and this is why we're doing this together, and this is why your work is so important. And, you know, by God's by the way he works in our church and our city, we can't do this without you. So I think why is way more important than what or how.
Great. For large volunteer teams, how would you suggest a staff person create relationships with such a large team?
Well, I think the reality is that you really can't. You have to define what relationship looks like. Knowing somebody is different than having a deep friendship. It's kind of the difference between if you're just in a church of, let's say, 300 people. Like, you walk in on Sunday, maybe you can sort of make a connection. You know who most people are. But that relationship is really different than your men's group that has 2 other people in there. And so I think that you kind of create kind of a span of care. So one of the things that we do when we help churches with their development system is basically build more layers, because one person isn't going to be able to have a relationship that has enough depth to it if they've got 20 volunteers, 50 volunteers, 100 volunteers. So you have to create some layers in that so that everybody feels known at a certain level. And so I think that's really, really critical to basically decide how many people can any one person truly know and invest in. For some churches, they may say 8. For some, they may say 15. I just don't think it's going to be like 20 or 50.
Great. What would you say are the top successful recruiting strategies?
I would say the things that we've seen, it depends on the role a little bit. I think for most of your volunteer positions, do kind of what we just said with that one church, which is basically have somebody or a couple of somebodies find out what all the volunteer needs are, and then do a good job of basically putting that on a piece of paper or a note card or a website, and then doing a good job drumming up interest for that. I think that kind of volunteer push, if you do that a couple times a year, that's going to be a really successful strategy. For things like group leader, for things like ministry team leader, roles that you just don't want to open up to everybody else, I think personal invite is always going to be the way to go. And when churches go, I don't know who's available, then I would say that you're trying to figure out a way to find the best of the best on each of your ministry teams, your volunteer teams, and then putting them into some kind of I don't necessarily want to use the language of boot camp, but some kind of short-term leadership development group, team, class, whatever it is, to where you can really begin to cultivate some relationships with the next wave of kind of second-level leaders.
Great. How do you develop leadership in a very small church leadership team, let's say 30 or under?
Find the 2, 3, 4 people, men or women, because you're not necessarily looking for a particular role. You're just looking for your best leaders that already exist. Look at what people do for work. Look at how people take initiative. You're just wanting people who are willing to take initiative, people who are self-aware, responsible, they get things done, they're resilient, and you want to basically grab 2, 3, 4 of those, and you want to begin talking about how are we going to lead as a church? You're going to talk about kind of core competencies, skills, knowledge. What kind of theological competencies do you want to get? So start with that small group and really invest in them, particularly if you're the lead pastor. You're going to be super encouraged by that group because they're going to basically not only show you the future of what's there, but they're going to remind you that you're not on your own. So grab a handful of people, invest some, 1 hour a week and spend some time with them. You invest in them, let them encourage you, and you're going to be on your way.
Great. How many training events should they do each year?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that if you're going to do training events, I'm going to give you two answers. One is I wouldn't do anything more than quarterly. And two, I would say that one of the things that's important is for you to understand the opportunity that technology is affording us, so that it's now possible for you to create content and distribute it to your leadership, to your volunteers, where they can watch it in their own home. And so there are platforms out there like trainedup.org, which is run by a friend of mine. And it's as simple as you doing what we're doing here, which is like create a slide deck and shoot a video over it. You could do that on your laptop and then just send it to them so they can watch it from their own home, get the content that you want them to get, but they don't have to basically disadvantage themselves and take time out of their busy schedule. They can just watch it kind of on demand. And so that's one way to think. But if you're going to do a training event, I wouldn't do any more than 4 a year, and I would probably say less than that. So for us, we're down to, I think, one big training event for everybody, and then maybe one other one based on our teams. So that'd be good.
Great. Would you say that there's anyone ineligible to volunteer? Are there any guidelines for that type of thing?
I think that's one of those things that churches have to decide on, is that I think when churches everybody has different things that you value. Some churches are only going to want covenant members serving. Okay, that's your choice. Others are going to basically have certain, basically moral kind of qualifications around that. And so I don't know if I can sit here and go, hey, this is what I think it would be there. I think it really just depends on the role. And I think there needs to be a real clarity about why we include who we include. And I would also say that you need to pay attention on the front end to go, who is not going to be able to do this, and how are we going to respond to people who don't like that? So if you're only going to include members, what about somebody who's not a member? If you're only going to include men, how are you going to help your women understand that? If you don't allow some people because of moral qualifications, how are you going to explain that in the way that you want to explain that? So I think it's up to the church. I just think you need to be well prepared for what you're going to do.
Great. We have one more for now. What would you say to a pastor who is having trouble getting their church to fill the volunteer needs?
One thing I would say is if you basically try to do something like have a clear understanding of the needs and communicate that to your people, and they're not responding, then I think you have to do the hard work of basically going, are we trying to do too much? Are we trying to do too many classes? Are we trying to do too many things? And then be willing to scale back for a season so that you're not overextending the people who are committed to serving. And I think that happens sometimes. It's kind of a pruning for a season in order for us to basically reinvigorate our leadership development system and then see more leaders later on. And so that may happen with your groups. That could happen in your nursery. That could just happen in terms of activity. So I would say do as good of a job as you can at recruiting without guilt. And if people still aren't responding, and then maybe you have a conversation, don't make the decision on your own, but with other people, particularly those who'd be affected by the change, then maybe consider scaling back some things. Okay. Those are great questions, y'all. We're going to do one more round of Q&A in just a few minutes, but so you've had a ton of questions for me. I got one question for you. Okay. And this is kind of a big one. Would you like help designing a leadership development system for your church? Now, you might go, why would I need help designing a leadership development system for your church? I'm going to assume that you want to have one of these, okay? So here's a couple of reasons why you might want help. One is because you don't want to do all the trial and error of figuring this out. It took us like 2 to 3 years to kind of figure out exactly what we needed to do. And you may be sitting here going, I don't have 2 or 3 years. Okay, then maybe you need some help. The other reason you might need some help is because just the amount of just frustration that comes when you don't know what to do next. And so you can guess and you can struggle and strain, but if you had something that would help you be able to move forward further, faster, without as much time and without all the trial and error, maybe that would be helpful to you, okay? So look, the past hour, we've covered a lot, okay? We covered how to recruit new leaders and how to train existing leaders and how to encourage all of your leaders. But there's a ton more that we could talk about. You know, you've got questions that are coming in still. And even if we had all day, we couldn't cover everything. So you need more than just a training. I love doing these training events, but if you are where I think you are, taking time and investing time out of your day to figure this out, then I think you need a system and a process that you can implement now. Not sometime next year, but you can actually begin working on it now. So I'm pretty excited to introduce Leadership Pipeline Academy to you, okay? So Leadership Pipeline Academy is a revolutionary step-by-step system that helps you design a leadership pipeline for your church in as little as 4 weeks, okay? So in 4 weeks, before you get to the end of 2016, you can have a simple and sustainable leadership development system designed for your church. So let me tell you how we do that. Here's what you're going to get with Leadership Pipeline Academy. We basically took my conversations and my personal coaching of all these churches over the past year, and we created an online program that has 4 modules. In module 1, you and I work together to assess how you develop leaders. This is pre-recorded. You have lifetime access to this. You can watch this 15 times, share with all your leadership. But the very first thing we do is we stop, and before we move forward, we pay attention to what's happening now. Every church is developing leaders. I want to make sure you have a framework for knowing how are you doing in developing leaders. And so that's module 1. Module 2 and module 3, we blueprint your pipeline. We actually do the design work together. I walk you through step by step by step. You need to bring nothing except a willingness to work hard to this. My responsibility and my experience through this is going to help you go step by step by step into designing the leadership development system your church needs. So in module 2, we do a first draft, and in module 3, I walk you through the final draft and how to scale that down so that you're not wasting any time, you're not doing too much, you're not missing opportunities, you're going to have the development system that your church needs right now. And then in module 4, we're going to help you construct your installation plan. If you're going to build a leadership pipeline, you've got to design it, then you install it before you can run it. So we help you design it, and then we help set the pace for you in installing it. So how do you take your design and take it out of theory, off the whiteboard, and put it into actual practice? We're going to help you do that. We have a really simple, elegant framework to help you do that. So all these modules include coaching. I walk you step by step through this, just like this. You're going to get a screen that looks so much like this. So we just basically walk you through step by step by step. And we have done for you resources, templates, transcripts, all the videos that we have there to help you think through this and how this applies to your church. And so what you end up with is something that's, I think, a really valuable resource for your church. I mean, this isn't going to Chuck E. Cheese and giving 5 tickets and getting some like plastic spider that you're going to lose in the car on the way home. This is something that's going to add significant value to your church. Now, let's talk about who this has worked for. If you're here, let's assume that it probably is going to work for you, but I want to dial it in because I don't want anybody to maybe get lost in this. Leadership Pipeline Academy is ideal if you are desperate for more leaders. If you absolutely need more volunteers, then Leadership Pipeline Academy, it's tested, it's tried, it works. You will get more leaders if you jump in and become part of this community. Pipeline Academy is ideal if you want to make sure you have the right kind of leaders, because we're going to give you a system and a framework for making sure that you're investing in the right people in the right way to get the right results, the results that you want and you need in your church. And I think Pipeline Academy is a fantastic solution if you need a long-term plan for developing every leader in your church, because we're not just talking volunteers. That may be where you're working right now, but how are you going to develop your elders? How are you going to develop staff? How are you going to develop group leaders? So this basically is going to give you a way to develop every single leader in your church from A to Z, from top to bottom. So this is one of our alumni, Dr. Jeff Robinson, who's the lead pastor at Lincoln Way Christian Church. He's got a church, it's a pretty sizable church, and he sent this into us. He said, Leadership Pipeline Academy gives you the rationale, the process, and the steps to develop a leadership pipeline for your church. You will have a plan and a structure to raise up leaders who are prayed for, cared for, equipped, and encouraged. And I don't know any church who doesn't want that for the men and women that you're investing in as leaders. So again, here's what you're going to get. You're going to get all 4 of these modules. It's a very simple ABC framework. We assess the leaders you have now, we blueprint your brand new design, and we construct your installation plan. ABC, assess, blueprint, construct. We do that in 4 online sessions. You have lifetime access to these videos. They go about 30 to 45 minutes each. There's no fluff. We get down to work, and you're going to get a ton of value from this. I'm going to walk you through step by step exactly what you need to do. We're going to put resources in your hands that are going to allow you to be able to do a great job with this. Now, I want to make sure, though, that you get as much value as you possibly can out of this. So we're really excited to give you a couple of other opportunities. One of the bonuses that we created is a private Facebook group. And you're going to basically now just not be learning from me, but you're going to be part of a group of dozens upon dozens upon dozens of churches that are trying to figure out how you develop volunteers and other leaders in your church. Now, we're going to make that available for the first 15 people who sign up for Pipeline Academy today, okay? So the first 15 get access to this bonus, all right? Now, we have another bonus too, and that is a volunteer development system that the Rocket Company has in place that I think works seamlessly with Pipeline Academy. It's basically going to not just take the guesswork out of developing volunteers, because I'm going to do that for you. It's going to give you actionable strategies so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So we're going to give you the framework in Pipeline Academy, and then the volunteer development system is going to do a fantastic job of making sure that you know exactly how to put this in motion for the volunteers in your church. And so we're going to make that available for the first 8 people who sign up today, okay? So we're trying to encourage you to jump on this and become part of this community. So now, here's what you're going to get. You're going to get the 4 modules of Pipeline Academy as I walk you through, coach you through step by step by step how you design and begin to install your leadership pipeline. And then for the first 15 people who jump on, you're going to get access to the private Facebook group, continue to learn from each other. We add more resources there, the volunteer development system for the first 8 people that jump on. And again, we're trying to create something that's extremely valuable and makes a difference in the life of your church and in your life as a leader in that church. Now, I want you to think about this. If all Pipeline Academy did was to clarify what you need to do right now, would it be worth that kind of investment? $2,500 is a lot of money. I don't care where you come from. It's a lot of money. But if it just clarified for you and you didn't have to feel overwhelmed by all the guesswork of what it takes to develop leaders, would it be worth the investment? If all Pipeline Academy did was to create momentum, okay, that leads to more leaders in a better church, if this is the thing that helps you move forward, you end up with more of the right kind of leaders in your church, and it improves your church. Would it be worth your time? Again, 45 minutes, 4 sessions that you invest in that, putting focus, attention on leadership development at the start of 2017, at the end of 2016. If you got momentum as you get into the new year, would it be worth your time? Or how about this? If all Pipeline Academy did was produce results that you could be proud of, that you could become one of the 2% of churches just in the United States, if you're stateside, only 2% of churches have an intentional leadership development system. If you did this and you've got great results and you could say, look, I'm really grateful that we've found and basically adopted a plan that we can invest in the people that are part of our church, would it be worth your commitment to become part of this community? Now, I want to make sure as you're considering this that if there are any questions that you have about the program itself that we kind of fill those in. So Kelly, why don't you jump in? Let's see what other questions we have about the program as we're helping people make this decision.
Matt, right now we don't have any specific questions about the program yet, so make sure to post those in the chat stream if you have any. I do have a few other questions that we can answer now, or if you would like to answer them in a little bit.
Yeah, I'll say 2 or 3. Let's go.
Okay. What is the best way to encourage leaders?
I think one of the most effective ways is just to intentionally let people know that you're paying attention to them. You're praying for them. How are you? It could be a handwritten note that just says, hey, I'm really grateful you're part of our church. I'm really grateful that when I look out there and I'm preaching that that you actually are giving me some nonverbal feedback or verbal feedback. That's always great too. I don't think the medium necessarily matters, handwritten note or text or whatever. I just think particularly if you're the senior minister or lead pastor, and I don't care what size of church it is, I think people value you in your role. And so when you take time out of your day to basically say, I see you, I care about you, I think that contributes a lot to changing that equation and making sure that you're doing all you can to make sure that you're on the 51 of that 51-49 equation.
Great, thank you. If you recruit volunteers before you need them, how do you make sure you get them plugged in so they feel needed and valued?
Yeah, I mean, I think that having somebody sit down with them through a very simple, basic job description, and giving them space to observe what's going on. Job description plus observation. We call that a walkthrough in our church. You let every single volunteer walk through the role before they fully commit. So if it's a brand new nursery volunteer, here's a job description, and then you're going to show up, and we're not asking you to do anything. Like if you want to help pass out Kool-Aid and cookies, great, but we're not going to ask you to jump in there the first week and be teaching the lesson and helping kids figure out the craft. I think people feel valued when you clarify expectations and you give them an opportunity to try before they buy.
Great. How do you remind yourself as a leader to continue to build and encourage and develop new volunteers and leaders?
I think if you are the lead pastor, the senior minister in your church, I would press on you and encourage you to make this one of the top 2 or 3 priorities in your church, because it does connect to discipleship, which is the work that you've been called to do. And in the same way that you're called to preach, I think developing leaders is a significant way that you impact the entirety of the church. So that would probably be my strongest encouragement, would be make it a priority, see it as significant, get it into your schedule, carve out time to make it happen and protect that time. And so in the same way you protect your time to develop your sermon, protect your time to develop your leaders.
That's so great. This is our last question. For volunteers on the roster who don't seem to be committed, would you recommend special attention to them, or to put your energy into the ones who are regularly serving?
Yeah, I mean, I would say try to do a good kind of first step with everybody. And then if you see people who have been kind of high capacity performers falling off, definitely follow up with them. I would say give it some effort, but not a ton. I really do believe that with any ministry or with any church, committed volunteers, probably 20% of the committed volunteers are going to produce 80% of the value. That means 80% of the people, they're not producing nothing, they're producing something, but not as much. And so it's a little bit different in every church, but I wouldn't just chase after the one quote unquote wandering sheep unless there's a significant reason that sheep is wandering. So here's what we're doing, and here's what we're going to make happen there. Okay. So good questions, y'all. And so look, I think you could see why churches have paid me over $10,000 to come in and help them build their leadership pipeline. I just have experience. I don't know if I'm an expert. I just have a lot of experience with this. Okay. And I think you could see why this is a good deal, that we basically make this available to the general public for $997. You can find this Pipeline Academy and you can jump onto it. And $997, that's a big investment, but it's less than $2,500. So I think you can see that's a pretty good deal. But because you're special, and you're special because you've been in this training, then I want you to get started today and want to make this offer to you. You can get started today in Pipeline Academy, designing the leadership development system your church needs for just $297. That's it, $297. And you could go sign up right now at getmorevolunteers.com. It's easy to remember. It should also be in the chat box. You just go to getmorevolunteers.com. There's a sales page there. Basically, we'll give you all the information you need to know about the program, but I want you to jump in today. All right? So to help you do that, we wanted to create something else. If you're still wondering, how do I know if this is going to work for our church? Well, I really want to help you on this. Is that here's one more bonus that I want to give you, okay? As you're sitting there looking at getmorevolunteers.com, here's the third bonus. I want to basically make an offer that I will personally evaluate your design and your installation plan, okay? We're going to make this available for the first 5 people only, but here's what's going to happen. When you finish the program, you're going to send us your design and your installation plan. I'm going to take a look at it. We're going to schedule a call, me working with you and your team, and I'm going to take my experience working with lots of churches and basically help you take your good design and make it great. I'm going to help you clarify exactly what you need to do, maybe some of the mistakes you could be making, and to take all the guesswork. If you're wondering if you're going to do this right, you and I working together, I promise you, we're going to get you on the right path. That's not because I know your church. It's because I know lots of churches, and I can help your church and help you get where you want to go. So that's a third bonus that we've added. So again, you can get started today for just, well, actually, I love this. We wanted to create an easy payment option because $297 is a good investment, but maybe you just can't get there from a cash flow standpoint. So we create an option to where if you pay and invest $97 today, There'll be 3 more additional monthly payments down the road, but for just $97 today, if you go to getmorevolunteers.com, then you can sign up and become part of the Pipeline Academy community this afternoon, right now. So getmorevolunteers.com and you can make that happen, okay? Now you have 2 choices. Now I apologize for this because I've left you in a position to where now you have one of 2 choices. You have to make a decision. Number 1, first choice, you do nothing and you don't take this leap of faith, okay? You don't have to. It's a choice. Like, you have to do nothing. And it is a leap of faith because you and I are best friends. You're not part of my church. Maybe you don't know me at all. So it is a leap of faith. Or you could take the second choice and pony up small investment today compared to all the value that you're going to get in return and see what happens. What I know is this: consistently, what we find is churches that make this investment change the game for themselves as leaders and for their churches overall. So again, here's what you're going to get if you jump in today. You're going to get all 4 modules to the Pipeline Academy. You're going to know what you're doing now in terms of developing leaders. We're going to allow you to evaluate that. We're going to help you blueprint the design for your pipeline. We're going to help you construct your installation plan. Coaching step by step. You bring nothing except a desire to work hard. I'm going to basically walk you through that process. We're going to put resources in your hands to help you do a great job. And then if you jump in, you're going to have access to these bonuses. First 15 people become part of the private Facebook group. The first 8 people become part of the volunteer development system. The first 5 people, I'm going to personally evaluate the work that you put into this to take away the guesswork of wondering if you're doing the right thing. I promise you, you and I work together, you're going to be on the right track, okay? So we've tried to create something that's immensely valuable to you, all right? So you can get started today for just $297. That's the best value. Or if you need a cash-friendly option, $97 today. You'll see that on the sales page when you go to getmorevolunteers.com. You can scroll all the way down to the bottom. You'll see those options. You can jump in and get immediate access to this fantastic program today, all right? Now, I promise you that if you had stuck around, that we will talk about. I'm going to give you the easiest way to develop any leader in your church, okay? As a volunteer, staff member, elder, deacon, group leader, whomever. Just ask these 2 questions regularly. And I want you to do this. When we're done, one leader in your church, I want you to ask these 2 questions. You can pick up a phone, you can shoot them a text, you can try to grab coffee at the end of the day, whatever it is. Just ask these 2 questions. Question 1, how are you? Not how are you doing, because they're not an automaton. Not how are you feeling, because that may be a little bit too intense. But you take maybe somebody you haven't talked to in a while, go, hey, just thinking about you, praying for you this afternoon. How are you? And then just listen. Treat them like a human being. Care about them. Pastor them. Let them know that they matter to you and that you care. And then secondly, how can I help you? They're a volunteer, they're a leader in your church. What are you working on right now? Is there anything I could do to help you as a group leader? Is there anything I could do to help you as the finance team director? Is there anything I could do to help you as you're working in the nursery? Those 2 questions. That's it. It's the easiest way to develop a leader. Why? You're demonstrating to people that you care about them, that you want more for them than you want from them, and then you're willing to give to them and invest in them by taking time out of your schedule, using your expertise, your genius, and you are saying, how can I come alongside and serve you? It's a game changer. Simple, right? So I guess the question is, why aren't you doing it, right? So let's talk about this one more time. Leadership Pipeline Academy. Again, we've talked about 4 online modules. You have lifetime access to that. All the bonuses we talked about. You could jump in right now for $297. That's almost a 90% discount off of what the value of what this holds. Or you could jump in for $97 today. You'll make 3 additional payments of $97. It's a cash-friendly option that we wanted to provide for you because we care about you and we want you to jump in. We want to take away the restrictions that would keep you from jumping in. So go to getmorevolunteers.com. I hope you become part of the community. I look forward to kind of just hearing stories and seeing how we can help you down the road. I do know this, that if you're on this call still and you're not going to jump into the community, I just want to thank you for, I think, your most precious commodity, which is your attention and your time. I hope that it's created value for you, that you can walk out of here with a very clear understanding of how you can recruit more leaders, more volunteers, how you can train existing leaders, how you can encourage all of your leaders. So again, I hope that I see you again down the road. I hope this Advent season is one where you, your family, and your church knows in a very real, fresh way the depth of God's love for you that we see in the birth of his son. So thank you so much for being part of this. Again, go to getmorevolunteers.com, become part of this community today, and we'll see you down the road. Thanks.